The autumn wind is a pirate, blustering in from sea. With a rollicking song he sweeps along, swaggering boisterously. His face is weather-beaten. He wears a hooded sash, with a silver hat about his head, and a bristling black mustache. He growls as he storms the country, a villain big and bold. And the trees all shake and quiver and quake as he robs them of their gold. The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun.
I don't shine shoes, I don't tape ankles, I don't cut checks. Great cash, homie.
Come on. Run them jewels fast, run them jewels fast, run them jewels fast, run them jewels fast.
Welcome to the Week 11 edition of the Rearview Mirror podcast. This is the podcast where we take a look back at everything from Week 10, still lingering in our rearview mirror, try to get a better understanding of why teams won, why they lost, what to expect from these teams moving forward, because we're going to spend a lot of time discussing this Week 11 card. Very intriguing and exciting games. More than anything, a lot of teams that are in playoff contention or at the limits, and they cannot afford any more losses, so we're going to break all those things down as we move forward. Just want to go back and recap before we get into the weekly headlines how we did with the free week preview. I always give a free week of free NFL selections just so you guys can get a better understanding of how I operate over at Sharp Football Analysis, the type of insight and information I provide, not just the recommendations, which obviously the goal there is to profit, and I've seen profit from my NFL recommendations now for 8 straight years, looking for the 9th this year, and we are on our way towards doing that. But more importantly, as we know, weeks can vary between highs and lows, and the goal is to educate ourselves, gain some knowledge so that over the course of time we're going to be able to show that profit. And this past week I went 5-2 on the free preview, hit a slight profit on the week as a result of that 5-2 record. Combine that with the college football, which I shared the plays on Sunday that I gave to clients on Saturday. Those plays were not part of the card. Those went 11-6. So overall we saw a record of 16-8 for all of the recommendations released to clients this week at 67%. Looking to continue to move forward on that. My strongest period of time is this late season run. Usually that starts right around week 12. I'm sure I'll put together some type of a package for people to get a good discount on plays moving forward as of week 12 onwards. But we're at week 11, so let's dig right into the headlines for week 11. Story number 1, big week for favorites. We saw NFL favorites this past weekend in week 10 go 9-3 against the spread. That's a 75% cover rate. And it's something that we haven't seen a rate that high since week 7 of the 2009 season when they actually went 10-2 straight up and 9-2-1 against the spread for an 82% cover rate. In the past 25 years, we've only seen 14 different weeks where favorites have hit 75% or more. So the question becomes, what happens the next week? What should we expect in the week following a week where NFL favorites really crush? So I've got the numbers cranked out here. I did some research on it. What we have seen, let's start at 65%. 65% or better. If the favorites go 65% or better the prior week, the very next week they go 48%. That's since 2006, and you can also extrapolate that all the way back. Look back at the last 25 years, they've gone about 48% as well. So a slight obvious regression to being less than profitable. If you were trying to back favorites at that number, you obviously need to clear 52.36% if you're laying minus 110 backing a favorite. So obviously this is below that number and certainly well below the 65% that they went the prior week. But it's not like it's 20% or 15%. Then up that percentage requirement, we obviously went 75% this past week. So if you say, what happens the week after favorites cover 70 and higher, 70% and higher? 44.8%, so less than 45% since 2006 and 47% the last 25 years. Now, I will say that obviously there's a lot of variance there as you're looking back. You can't just say that dogs are going to crush it definitively this upcoming week. We've seen weeks where off of a 70% or better week, we saw, for instance, in 2007, favorites went 10-5. That's 67% against the spread. The very next week, after already going 70% in 1 week. But the last few years where we've seen 70% or higher, I'll look back to 2009. It's even lower. We've only seen 3 weeks since 2007 where favorites hit 70% or higher in a given week. That tells you how rare it was for us to hit 75% this past week, and that's why the books really took a beating this past weekend, is how good the favorites performed against the spread, straight up, etc. But the last 3 times that we've seen favorites hit 70% or higher, the next week, 42.9%, 41.7%, and another 42.9%. That's 6 and 8 against the spread. So it's not like we're 8 games below 500 or something the very next week, but these results have been below 500 on average, though there are some random occurrences where favorites will do really well again. So should look to see some favorites struggle this next upcoming week, while others will obviously perform well. And overall, I think we should see dogs finish with a better than 50% ATS record, although that's not guaranteed, certainly far from it, but that's what it looks like we most likely will see. Story number 2, wide open races in the playoffs. We are really seeing some, I think, races that are really, really going to come down to the wire. And also we're looking at teams that really are not as dominant as perhaps you might think that they are. So for instance, let's look at all the teams that have lost 1 or 2 games and no more than that. Most of these teams actually have their losses by double digits, which certainly is not something you might expect when a team is 7-2 and looks like a great team to actually go out there and blow games, but that's what we've been seeing. So let's take a step back. The Denver Broncos lost to the Seattle Seahawks on the road by 6 points and lost to the New England Patriots by 22 points. The Arizona Cardinals only lost 1 game. That game was in Denver. They lost that one by 21 points. The Dallas Cowboys, they've actually lost 3 games, so I'm including them anyways because they're a team that a lot of people were looking at. They've certainly lost versus the Redskins versus the Cardinals before winning over in London, so they lost back-to-back weeks in addition to week 1. But they've lost by 11 points twice and by 3 points once. The Detroit Lions, they lost twice. They lost to the Carolina Panthers, if you remember, way back in week 2 by 17 points, and then they lost to the Bills by 3 points. And even the New England Patriots, their 2 losses came by 13 points to the Dolphins and then 27 points to the Chiefs. The only team on this list is the Philadelphia Eagles that has not had a massive loss in terms of by a lot of points. They lost to the 49ers by 5 points and the Arizona Cardinals by 4 points. So definitely teams on this list, I don't think you can across the board say that none of these teams are capable of being beaten. You can't even say that the only team that could beat the New England Patriots are the Denver Broncos or something to that extent. The only team that could beat the Denver Broncos are the New England Patriots. I think you're going to see a lot of teams that might be ranked or seeded a little bit high, such as the Arizona Cardinals, such as the Detroit Lions, that certainly have flaws and certainly can be beat. And you're also going to have teams from the old school that, like the New England Patriots, like the Denver Broncos, that are teams that obviously have their issues and their struggles as well, and I think could be beat in addition. So I think we're going to see a very exciting playoffs and a very, very exciting race here to the finish of this regular season. I can't wait for it personally. Every single week offers new and better intrigue, and I'm really looking forward to it. That really transitions well into story number 3. Let's look at our updated projections from NFLproject.com. What we're seeing here, I'll flash up this graphic. On the right is this week, as of the latest simulation model, what are we looking at for the playoff race? And off to the left, we're looking at what was the race like last week. So let's start over in the NFC, which is the left-hand section of both graphics. The only difference that we are seeing, because pretty much all of these teams won, except for the Saints, they have a narrower lead in the NFC South, but they're still the team that's projected to make the playoffs from that division. The difference is that the Detroit Lions moved ahead of the Green Bay Packers into that final playoff spot. Now, I want to make it known that their edge is ever so slight. It was a very small window that allowed them to get pushed past the Green Bay Packers into that final position. And really, I mean, these are very close teams. Like I said, it's these teams. Both these teams are more than likely going to make the playoffs right now. The Detroit Lions have over 80% chance to make it. The Green Bay Packers are over 75% chance to make it. So pretty much we are going to see both of these teams in the playoffs. And for instance, if the Green Bay Packers don't make it in terms of winning their division, then it's probably likely that maybe they'd slide back here to the 6th seed and take it away from the Dallas Cowboys. But right now, we are seeing the Packers being just outside of that 6th seed based on the playoff projections. So I don't want to alarm the Green Bay Packers fans out there, but it's very imperative that your team continues to win games, and obviously you're hoping that the Detroit Lions slip up. Looking over at the AFC, we are seeing a lot of consistency between the 2 teams from the AFC West, which is Denver and Kansas City. We're looking at the number 1 overall seed combined with the number 1 wildcard seed, which takes the 5th spot overall. They've been there last week and they're here again this week. And obviously the Patriots and the Colts have not moved anywhere. We're seeing the shakeup in the AFC North where both the Steelers and the Bengals lost last week. It vaulted the Ravens and the Browns into this position. And you may ask, well, why are the Browns currently projected to finish the year as the number 4 seed and win that division? Right now, they obviously have one game up on the Baltimore Ravens because they've won an extra game. And the Ravens are on a bye this week. So we'll see what happens to Cleveland this week. Obviously, if they drop their game this weekend, which they are projected to win that game, but a percentage chance of winning games, what people need to understand is when you're looking at the schedule and penciling in wins or losses, you don't just look and say, oh, well, the Baltimore Ravens are playing the Cleveland Browns week 17 in Baltimore, so that should be a win for Baltimore. It more than likely will be a win, but it's a percentage. So I'm sure this algorithm is applying like a 58% chance for Baltimore to win that game, or maybe slightly higher, and the other percentage chance of 42% or whatever it ends up being for Cleveland to pull off the upset. So no matter, even if it's Jacksonville playing Denver, there is going to be a 1 or 2% or something chance that Jacksonville actually wins that game. So Denver's not going to have a 100% shot at that game. That's kind of how this algorithm works when it's projecting out for the upcoming week. So very likely that Baltimore, having won already in Cleveland and winning again in week 17 against the Browns, should their records be identical at that point, obviously Baltimore is the team that's going. Should they split, then it's going to come down, and the records are identical, then it's going to come down to other tiebreakers. But again, the model right now isn't looking at sitting at week 17 looking backwards in time and saying, well, the records are identical and this is who is going to be better. Right now the model is sitting in week 11 and it's projecting every single game to be played out. It takes account to home and away and all those different types of things. So right now the races that are ultra close between two teams in the same division, Green Bay and Detroit, is razor thin as to which team gets in and which team would get out. And right now the edge between the Ravens and the Browns is also razor thin. Could easily flip-flop in the next week. Right now both of those teams though are projected to make the playoffs. With that said, that takes care of the headlines. Let's go ahead and jump right into our stats and charts. Let's start talking about the early down success rate for offenses. Right away, we'll look at the top 5 teams offensively, and we notice there's a new team that's moved up there into the top 5, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ironically, even though they played the Jets last week and they lost that game, they didn't score very many points, they actually have one of the best early down success rate performances of the entire weekend, and we're going to get into that when we talk about that game in greater detail, but certainly a very tremendous performance offensively from them in early down success rate. It was turnovers and lack of performance in the red zone that killed them ultimately, but and prevented them from winning that game and sending it over, which was one of the recommendations that I liked on the card this past weekend that didn't come through, obviously. Teams on the rise, the Redskins and the Broncos. Obviously, we can expect the Broncos there. I'm actually kind of surprised they aren't in the top 5 already. But the Washington Redskins are a team that I think would surprise a lot of people given the turmoil and the various quarterbacks that are starting for them. I think if you value early down success rate, which I do, and I've obviously shown that it is favorable and successful in predicting game outcomes as well as correlating to success of teams from their win-loss perspective, then you must give credit to Jay Gruden with what he's done offensively for that team despite the rotating quarterbacks that they've had on their roster. Obviously, they started off with RG3 trying out a new offensive system. Then they had to move into their backups. They just started flying right through backups left and right. All the backups, poor decision making, throwing interceptions, and now we saw what happened when Colt McCoy went in there and didn't turn the ball over. They actually won on the road, beat the Dallas Cowboys to give them their first loss since week 1 versus the 49ers. So that was a big performance from the Redskins offense. Then we look at the bottom 5 teams, and all the teams here are teams that you're used to seeing on this list. I believe the Raiders may have jumped in here, but teams that are falling, we're seeing, the Raiders jumped in here because you can see right next to the red arrow are the biggest movers of the past weekend, and the Oakland Raiders had the worst early down success rate against the Denver Broncos, so they fell into the bottom 5. Even adjusting for schedule, their performance was terrible against the Denver Broncos last weekend. The Cincinnati Bengals also fell into very close contention for the bottom 5. That performance in Cleveland, actually it was at home versus Cleveland on Thursday night, just abysmal. What that offense looked like, terrible under Andy Dalton's leadership and a $100 million contract, so that really was not strong at all. And the San Francisco 49ers are a team that offense still has not come around. They won the game in New Orleans, but they did not look good doing it. Obviously, they looked bad when they lost at home to the St. Louis Rams the week before, so we'll have to see where this team heads offensively. Flipping over to the defenses, we see the top 5 defenses. The one big surprise here, the Philadelphia Eagles are now a top 5 defense when you adjust for strength of schedule in terms of who this team has faced They have put on some very strong performances. They actually rank third overall, but when you factor in their schedule, they actually move up to second overall versus strength of schedule in terms of early down success rate defense. Very underrated right now what they're doing defensively. They gave up a ton of points in the preseason, a ridiculous amount of points, but defensively, they've definitely come along and played very well during the season, particularly from early down success rate. However, let's see how they fare with the loss of their middle linebacker. I think that is going to be a key injury that we really didn't get to see a lot of. D'Amico Ryans is now out for the year, so that's going to be a big blow to them. We also have the Browns and the Vikings on the rise. We saw Cleveland, obviously what they did to Cincinnati, push them up into a team that's on the bubble there towards the top 5. Bottom 5 defenses. All the teams that you tend to recognize are right there on the list. No real surprises there because we've been talking about them for weeks. Texans and Bucks are teams that are both falling. If you look at the teams that performed the worst last week, just look no further than the state of New York. The Giants were terrible to what they did to Seattle, and I can't wait to talk about that game in some detail. And same thing with the Jets and the Steelers. We'll break that game down in a great level of detail moving forward. Before we get on to breaking down those games in great detail, I want to flip up this graphic. This is a chart I shared with everyone because it was free to join last week. This was a look at the game. The next graphic will be the Philadelphia Eagles. This is the Carolina Panthers. And although you might not be able to read it with that resolution, I'm not sure, depending on where you're sitting close to your monitor. One thing I'll tell you is this is early down success rate, defense versus offense, in a week-by-week performance, not taking into account strength of opponent. This is just pure early down success rate metrics. And the offense is in blue, and when the offense is in blue, you want to have a strong early down success rate. So you want that number to be high. You don't want it to be low, and by all means, you don't want it to be declining as the year is going on, and that's exactly what is happening with the Carolina Panthers. And then when you look at defensively, that's in red. You want your defensive number to be low. That would be your opponent's offense. You want their offensive numbers to be low on this board. And what are we seeing? That the blue line is low and the red line is high, trending in the wrong direction, opposite directions. That's obviously not good. Looking at the next sheet, we're looking at the Philadelphia Eagles here. And in this case, we are seeing the blue line for them, which is offense, trending up high, which is good. And we're seeing the red line for them trending down lower, which means the opposing team's offenses are doing worse. And so those are moving in the right direction in terms of a several-week trend. Obviously, week 9, they allowed some stronger performance to the other team's offense, but they accommodated that with a very good performance from their own offense. So the value here is looking at some of these things. Visually, you're able to see some of these trends. And I look at these. This is part of my data set that I review every single week as I'm breaking down games and sharing some of this information with you. But from time to time, I might share it in this visual manner with you through my write-ups from my recommendations to get a better understanding of what I'm looking at and how I'm deciding on which games I'm recommending and why on my end of the spectrum. And unlike some guys, I don't mind sharing information like this with clients. Every single week, it's a new adventure trying to break things down and analyze matchups. And whereas other people don't want to share anything at all, I don't mind doing it because I do research over and over. I think really, in some cases, people don't like sharing it because they want to keep a secret and just keep repeating themselves. But I'll keep playing a team if I see that they have an edge, and I'll fade a team consistently if I see that there's a problem. In other cases, I'll jump back and forth based on what the research is showing me. Every single week is different, and that's part of the fun. That's part of the fun of breaking down these games, going through them. So let's do that right now. Let's break down what happened in Week 10. Let's start with the Thursday night game. All clients, you're able to follow this on your list as you have your table there from the blog, either printed out or pulled up on your machine. Let's start with the Bengals hosting the Browns. This is an abysmal performance by Andy Dalton and the Cincinnati Bengals, just across the board, but obviously it comes from the quarterback on down who has the most influence on a game's outcome. We saw that his 33% completion rate was the worst in the league. The 2.0 yards per pass attempt is a joke and was worst in the league. And the 6.3 passer rating was just the biggest joke, and that was worst in the league. How can you have a 6.3 passer rating? I don't even know how that's possible when you're passing at least 39 attempts. You must have been really terrible. And sure enough, 3 interceptions, no passing touchdowns, no touchdowns at all for the Bengals as they score only 3 points at home. You can argue, some apologists might say, well, the weather was bad, so this is a problem. Guess what? Brian Hoyer, guy who's making nothing compared to Andy Dalton, he passed for 8.6 yards per attempt. That was 5th best in the whole league this past weekend compared to Andy Dalton's 2.0. He also passed for 65% completions and a 92 passer rating. Both of those were 7th best in the league. So drop it on a story about the weather affecting Andy Dalton. If he didn't play well in the weather or he didn't play well at night, it's not because it's nighttime or it's not because of the weather. It's because he's not a very good quarterback. And those things come to a head at certain points, and obviously they came to a head this past game. When you look at what the Browns were able to do, in addition to efficient play from their quarterback, they didn't run a tremendous amount. You're not going to see that from them. They ran 3.3 yards per carry, so that's not a tremendous amount. But 52 rushes means that they're controlling the clock. And they sure enough did. 36 minutes time of possession compared to 24. Keep in mind, this was in Cincinnati. They outgained the Bengals by 10 first downs. So they had better third down percentage, a better early down success rate. The Bengals were basically second worst in the league in first downs gained, early down success rate, third down conversion percentage. So definitely a problem for the Bengals, and the Browns certainly performed very well in that role. Let's look at the Chiefs traveling out to Buffalo. I think the main story for this game was the Buffalo Bills defense. The Buffalo Bills defense, let's go through these stats and keep in mind, we are talking about Alex Smith. Alex Smith is not going to be that quarterback who's going to be heaving the ball deep down the field. He's that quarterback who's completing a high percentage for a decent yards per pass and a pretty solid passer rating. A 59% completion rate is not very good for Alex Smith. 5.2 yards per attempt is not very good for Alex Smith. And a 73% pass rating is not very good for Alex Smith. That's what the Bills defense held this team to. Now, they did give up 5.3 yards per carry to the Kansas City Chiefs and Jamal Charles in the run game. But the problem here for the Buffalo Bills was their offense. Their offense committed 3 turnovers. They lost 3 fumbles. And so despite the fact that they led after the first quarter by 4 points, after the second quarter by 7 points, and after the third quarter by 10 points, it ultimately bit them in the butt. And you remember there was a carry where the running back is running wide open into the end zone. The ball gets knocked out of his arm. It gets kicked out through the back of the end zone for a touchback. I mean, it's just some ridiculous situations that if you actually had the Buffalo Bills on the money line, which I did not, if you remember, we teased the Bills because we know the Chiefs, they play in very close games. They don't usually win by wide margins. So I felt like certainly this was a good spot to tease the Bills, and that ended up being very appropriate for us in this one because the straight-up play on the Bills did not win, but it certainly should have in this case. I like the pass rush from the Bills, sacked Alex Smith 6 times, and that really put a lot of pressure on them. They were 24th in third down conversion rate at only 23%. So very poor third down rate for the Chiefs. Very good defensive performance for the Bills. An okay offensive performance. They actually ran the ball pretty well, but the problem was those turnovers lost them the game. Tampa Bay versus the Falcons. This is a game where you got to wonder where the defense was and truthfully how they only scored 27 points for the Falcons and 17 for the Bucs because they left a lot of points out there on the field. When you think about this, both teams were top 4 in terms of third down conversion rate. The Bucs actually converted 71% of their third down attempts. That was best in the league against this Falcons defense. I don't know that speaks so much towards the Bucs offense as it does the Falcons defense, but Bucs obviously turned it over several times, including a couple of big bombs at the end of the game that didn't really factor as much as they were trying to come back into the game in terms of losing them the game. They were already trailing at that point in time. But both of the teams combined went 3 of 6 inside the red zone. Now, my numbers leaned slightly towards the over in this spot, but I didn't feel as confident in the Bucs, particularly with Josh McCown as their quarterback, making his first start with the team, even though he was going up against a miserable Atlanta Falcons defense. I just thought there could be a little rust and some problems there. So instead of playing the game over, which did not hit, it actually went under. I decided to play the Falcons over their team total, which was 23.5 or probably at worst a 24. And that obviously went over. They scored 27 points. So that's an example of trying to be creative and play out the game in your mind and figure out some edges. There are some times you could outsmart yourself, but in this particular case, a very strong play that ultimately resulted in a winner, taking the Falcons over their team total against the Buccaneers. I think the story to be taken from this game is both defenses obviously are struggling. We saw only 3 punts from each team in this game, so not very good performance there in terms of these defenses. So to carry that forward when you look at some of these games coming up. The Cardinals and the Rams, totally opposite story. You want to talk about some good defenses here. We saw some good defensive performance from the Cardinals in this game, and the Rams actually, they defensively did okay against this Arizona Cardinals team, but particularly that came against the run. They really shut down the Arizona Cardinals run game. They only ran for 28 total yards on 22 carries. That's 1.3 yards per carry. That's very low. That's the worst in the league this past weekend. So they shut down the run and put it on the quarterback's shoulders, which was the quarterbacks were more than capable. Obviously, Carson Palmer goes down, tears his ACL up. Drew Stanton comes back in and leads this team to a victory. Very strong performance from Drew Stanton, but the quarterbacks combined 68% completion percentage. That was 4th best in the league, 7.5 yards per attempt. They did throw 1 interception, so that lowered their overall passer rating down to an 88%. But when you talk about the Cardinals defense, they held the Rams to just 10% conversions on third down. It's terrible, worst in the league. So, of course, the Rams were punting a lot. They went 1 of 10 on third down. So that was a very bad statistic from them. And the Rams had 3 turnovers to the Cardinals 1. Ultimately, though, 2 pick sixes, I believe, at least 2 non-offensive touchdowns were scored. One was a pick six. The other one was either a fumble recovery or a second interception return. So they ended up winning that game by 17 points. Strong performance by the Cardinals defense, and they certainly need to fix their run game a little bit. Running for that low of a yardage against the St. Louis Rams is not going to get it done. Let's move over to the game in London. The Jaguars played the Cowboys. This game was interesting because you'll see as this row depicts and this information shows you that the Cowboys offensively very efficient when you talk about their completion percentage, their yards per pass attempt, their passer rating of 137, their yards per rush, and they're obviously then that translates into their yards per play being the third best in the league this past weekend. But the weird part about them was that their early down success rate was not very good, 19th in the league, and their third down conversion rate was likewise not very good at 18th in the league at 31% conversion. So the Jaguars defense was stepping it up, I guess forcing the Cowboys into certain situations in down and distance that made the Cowboys a little bit less efficient perhaps than they otherwise should have been. But obviously from a numbers perspective, and when you look at the yards per play and pass and rush and all those types of things, very good performance for the Dallas Cowboys offense. And defensively for the Cowboys, certainly limited the Jaguars in some respects, held them to 3 yards per carry, and a good overall performance. Moving ahead to the Steelers and Jets, I'll talk a little bit more about this game because I like the over in this game. And obviously I was happy when the score was 17-0 at the end of the first quarter. Certainly that's more than enough to get us on pace to go over the total in this spot. But then we started to see some things emerge that really put a kibosh on that. First of all, this Pittsburgh Steelers, multiple red zone turnovers, 0 for 3 inside the red zone. Those numbers are not going to get you anywhere, particularly when your offense had been clicking inside the red zone in recent weeks. So that's number one. Number two, you have the fact that both field goal kickers missed a field goal attempt, so that's 6 points that gets wiped off the board. And number three, look at the overall red zone efficiency from both teams. It combined 1 of 6 on the day inside the red zone. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers defense is not very good. The Pittsburgh Steelers offense had been pretty good. And so you would think that we'd see at least a 50% rate, which would have sent this game over with ease, but that didn't happen. And we saw some missed field goals and turnovers, just in the worst situations. It was more or less not our day for that one. Nothing else you could say about it. Now, let's break down the way that this game actually went, because it pretty much went in a similar manner to what I thought from between the 20s. I thought that the New York Jets were going to have some success, more success than they've had in the past against this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. And sure enough, they ran the ball for 4.2 yards per carry, 150 total yards. Mike Vick passed for 6.9 yards per attempt, which was 10th best, a 114 passer rating, which was 3rd best. He had 2 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. Just a very, very good performance by Mike Vick. He ran a few times when he needed to. So they did well enough to win this game, certainly. 20 points up on the scoreboard. Should have been enough probably to send it over, even though they only went 1 for 3 in the red zone. The problem was the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's not that they couldn't do anything against this New York Jets. It's far from it. As I mentioned in the early down success rate portion of this, the Steelers actually posted the 2nd best early down success rate of the entire weekend. So they didn't get to 3rd down very much at all. They had 22 first downs, which was 5th best in the league, and they only went to 3rd down 11 times. Their early down success rate was 2nd best in the league. When they did go to 3rd down, however, they still converted 55%. That was 3rd best in the league. So this was a team that was moving the ball consistently. And with numbers like that, you would obviously expect to see a high yardage total. And sure enough, they had almost 100 more yards in this game than did the New York Jets. So they moved the ball well. They could not run the ball well. They only ran for 2.1 yards per carry. So the Jets snuffed out their rushing attack, put it on Big Ben. He came to play, however, from a delivering standpoint, aside from interceptions. 30 of 43, 70% completions, 7.6 yards per attempt. So all of those were good. The problem was the turnovers and the failures inside the red zone, some of which were turnovers, others of which were just straight up failures. And that ended up costing this game, cost the Steelers their win, cost us the over. Lions and the Dolphins, this game ended up being pretty strong from the Miami Dolphins offense from an efficiency perspective in terms of passing the ball efficiently, 71% completions, but very inefficient when you're talking about where those passes went. They only gained 4.7 yards per attempt. That was the 3rd worst in the league this past weekend. So they weren't able to get any big plays in the pass game. They also could not run the ball, only 2.6 yards per carry. So overall against this Detroit Lions defense, they only gained 3.8 yards per play. That was 3rd worst in the league. I definitely expected better to come from the Miami Dolphins offense than what they showed out there on the field. Part of that was due to Brandon Albert, their left tackle, getting injured, I think sometime in the 2nd quarter, I believe. That was a bad injury for that team. It really set them back, and it's going to set them back in the coming weeks, I believe. It's going to be a factor with his injury. But as it relates to this team and the Lions in general, this game itself, 2 red zone touchdowns in 7 red zone trips. Very poor numbers. We saw turnovers went down in the red zone again, like we saw in the Pittsburgh Steelers game. It's a very difficult game offensively to watch. Certainly defensively, if you like defense, there was some good defense on display. Matthew Stafford, no doubt, enjoyed having Calvin Johnson back. 64% completions, a 90 passer rating. So overall, decent numbers, but not great. Nothing tremendous out of Matthew Stafford, but good enough numbers. And so it'll be interesting when this Miami Dolphins team hosts the Buffalo Bills here tonight, how that offensive line protects without Brandon Albert in there. Moving and looking at the Green Bay Packers versus the Chicago Bears, obviously this was utter domination. 10 yards per pass attempt, that was best in the league. 133 pass rating, that was second best in the league. 7 touchdowns scored by the Green Bay Packers. They earned them. They only had one non-offensive touchdown, but so did the Bears, so each team had a non-offensive touchdown. Wiped that away. The final score was 48-7. Include those, it was 55-14. This game was a 14-point game after the first quarter, ballooned all the way to 42 points. 42 points at halftime. So they outscored them by a ridiculous amount there in the second quarter. The Chicago Bears, their numbers offensively were not good. They were trying to get Matt Forte more involved, but they could only run for 2.3 yards per attempt, so that was not good. So the burden fell more onto Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler, 58% completions, not great, although Aaron Rodgers was only 59%. 6.4 yards per attempt, though. It couldn't hit on enough big plays. That was 14th in the league, and his passer rating was a 64. That's because he had 2 interceptions on the day as well. 0 for 2 in the red zone. They were very good early down success rate. The Bears were able to bypass third down fairly frequently, but they were just not able to control the ball enough. They couldn't crank out enough big plays against this Green Bay Packers defense. And so ultimately, although they did lose 2 more turnovers than the Green Bay Packers did, that's not the difference here in this game. It was just execution and efficiency out of the Green Bay Packers and lack thereof out of the Chicago Bears, and they're in a real problem. Obviously, they're not going anywhere now, but you're going to have the infighting and players pointing fingers at one another and other issues that happen in the locker room for a team that was a strong team and thought they were going to do something this year is now 3-6. This season could go any number of directions, but not very many of them are going to be extremely positive, so we'll see how that plays out. The Oakland Raiders versus the Denver Broncos, another case of a dominating performance, but this one was definitely, even though not as one-sided on the scoreboard, when you actually look at some of these statistics, you'll see really how one-sided it was. When you look at the early down success rate, first of all, as well as the first downs, in that Packers-Bears game, both teams actually had 21 first downs. Both teams had the same number of first downs. In this game, the Broncos had 25 first downs. The Raiders only had 10. That was the fewest in the league. Their early down success rate for the Raiders was last in the league this past week, whereas the Broncos was 4th best. So this team, not very good offensively. 4.1 yards per pass attempt, second worst in the league. 2.0 yards per run attempt, 24th in the league, so third worst rather. Combine those, the yards per play, 3.6. That was second worst in the league. I took the over in this game, and what did I tell you guys when I took that over? I said that the Raiders defense was having their issues. They're not going to perform very well against the Broncos offense. That obviously was the case. The other thing I said, though, is that while the Raiders do not get down to the red zone very often, when they do, they're actually the second best team in the league in terms of converting touchdowns, and that's the reason I like the over. I felt like and I was telling our friend Crack about this, who you hear talk to me every single week on the podcast that I release to clients on Sunday mornings, but he and I talk all week long, throughout the week, multiple times, passing along information to him and that sort of thing, and I said if the Raiders get 17 points, this game's going over. Now, it turns out the game already went over in the third quarter. The Raiders only had 10 points on the scoreboard at that time, but because the Denver Broncos put up 41, it was 51 at that point in time. We had 49 as our total, so it went over by that point, but the Raiders did, in fact, go 2-2 inside the red zone 100%, got their 17 points, and it did go over the total pretty nicely. The Broncos obviously are rolling, and the Raiders are struggling. They do not have a single win to their name. That was a big against the spread loss after the against the spread win up in Seattle 2 weeks prior. Now they have to go to division rival San Diego and try to make something happen there. Tennessee Titans at Baltimore Ravens. This game was really going to be a measuring stick for me, looking at the Baltimore Ravens, especially moving forward throughout the rest of the season into the postseason. How high is my stock going to be on this team? Because they've had some concerning losses. They also lost a key position in their secondary that is certainly a problem for them moving forward. And they're facing the Tennessee Titans, who is a bad football team. They're bad defensively. They're even worse offensively. And this is a team in Baltimore who typically has these guys come into their house and takes care of business soundly. I watched some of this game, obviously, as I watch all the games, and was not very impressed by the Baltimore Ravens. The best part about them was they got pressure on Mettenberger. They sacked him 5 times. But other than that, let's compare some of these numbers. First of all, it was tied at halftime. Baltimore was actually trailing after the first quarter. Baltimore was ahead by 7 points entering the fourth quarter as a 10.5 point favorite. Not very good. Now, granted, they did win by 14 points, but they were trailing after the first quarter and tied at halftime. That's a concern for me. Then you look at the quarterback performance. Of course, I expect Mettenberger to struggle, and he actually went 16 to 27, 59%. What did Joe Flacco do? 16 of 27 for 59%. The exact same numbers as what Mettenberger, the rookie, did, is Joe Flacco did against this bad Tennessee Titans defense. Even though Flacco was only sacked once, he still had those poor numbers. You look at the running game, Tennessee really couldn't run the ball, 3 yards per carry. Baltimore relied heavily on the run because Joe Flacco really wasn't playing all that great in this game. So they ended up rushing 34 times, but they only gained 4.4 yards per carry. Good number, not outstanding, but still a decent number on the ground running the ball. Look at some of the efficiency numbers, however. Baltimore Ravens, only 18 first downs in this game. That was 18th in the league. 14th best early down success rate offensively. Only 31% conversions on third down. These numbers are just somewhat concerning to me. So my main takeaway was a little bit downgrade on the Baltimore Ravens. Although they did win by 14 points, they did not look very good doing it. Hopefully during the bye week, they'll figure some things out and fix some things because this division could be theirs for the taking. They obviously have to take care of business in versus Cleveland at home week 17 and win the games that they're supposed to win the rest of the way out. And they'll be the winner of the AFC North. So, but they are going to need to play better, certainly against some of their opponents coming out of the bye. San Francisco 49ers at the New Orleans Saints. I'm not sure what was going on in this game because I saw Colin Kaepernick a couple weeks ago not look good. He came into this game and did not look good once again. 14 of 32, that was 44% completions. Only Andy Dalton was worse than Colin Kaepernick was this past week in terms of his completion percentage. And this is the New Orleans Saints defense. I know you're playing on the road in the Dome, but those are very poor numbers. Now, they were bailed out by two things. Number one, the run game. The run game ended up running for 4.5 yards per carry on the road, 144 total yards, so that was strong. And the turnovers by the Saints, they turned the ball over 3 times, so that obviously helped things a lot too for the San Francisco 49ers. When you look at these two teams, though, in the red zone, the New Orleans Saints allowed San Francisco, who is not a very good red zone team, to get down there 4 times and score 3 touchdowns. They went 2 of 2 for touchdowns inside the red zone. That's a bad future for the New Orleans Saints in terms of predicting how they're going to perform. If they're at home and allow the San Francisco 49ers red zone offense to convert 75% of their red zone trips into touchdowns, that's very bad. Look at early on success rate. Neither team was incredibly great. Drew Brees actually did not have a very good game. He threw the ball 47 times, only completed 28 of them. So I was overall not very impressed by Drew Brees. Was it the 49ers defense or was it Drew Brees? But either way, he did not play extremely well. Now, they did have a 5.3 yards per play. That was 10th best in the league, though. 423 total yards. Obviously, this game did go into overtime, so that plays a role in terms of their total accumulation of yardage. But overall, not very impressed by the Saints defense in this game. And not very impressed by Colin Kaepernick. He's going to need to pick it up if this team stands a chance. They're going to run the ball, and they're going to have success running the ball because they're a decent run team. But they still need that efficiency out of Colin Kaepernick. They still need his production. And if he's not going to deliver it passing the ball, he needs to deliver it running the ball. So big question there in terms of what actually happens moving forward. The Seattle Seahawks hosting the New York Giants. I don't know what's going on with this New York Giants defense, but look at these numbers from the Seattle Seahawks offense. 27 first downs, that was the most in the NFL. The best early down success rate. When they did go to third down, which was infrequently because they had the best early down success rate, they converted 58% of their trips on third down. So obviously that's very strong. When you look at what they did in terms of getting to the red zone, they got to the red zone 7 times and scored 5 touchdowns. Seattle Seahawks offense is not that good. Should not have that many trips. They should not have that large of a red zone conversion percentage. Goal to go, they were 4 of 5. Scored 5 touchdowns. Russell Wilson, 9.4 yards per pass attempt. They ran for 7.8 yards per carry. 350 rushing yards on 45 rushing attempts. All of these numbers are ridiculous, and this is not a very good Seattle Seahawks offense. This is an average Seattle Seahawks offense. So to produce like that, it tells you this New York Giants defense is putrid. And they looked putrid a couple of weeks ago. They're still looking putrid out in Seattle. Be very interested to see how they look against San Francisco, because San Francisco, as we know, Colin Kaepernick struggling a little bit. But this defense looks horrible, and this really could be a get-right game for Colin Kaepernick and the San Francisco 49ers, albeit a 1 p.m. early start out east. They still should be able to execute against this very poor New York Giants defense. Now, offensively for New York, yes, they did play the Seattle Seahawks on the road. However, they played pretty well. Eli Manning, not a tremendous passer rating because he did throw an interception, not a tremendous yards per pass attempt, but 66 pass completions percentage. That was very strong. When you look at what this team did from a red zone perspective, 100% of their red zone trips, 2 of them they scored touchdowns on. They had the 4th best early down success rate, the 4th best third down conversion rate. So this New York Giants team, very strong from that regard offensively against the Seattle Seahawks defense. They could not really run the ball, so hopefully they get their starting running back back in the fold this week, because they definitely could use Rashad Jennings. He's apparently upgraded to probable in this game, so we'll see if he is able to play. But certainly some issues there with this offense in terms of that performance on the ground. But overall, pretty good game, and from them offensively, terrible from them defensively. So that's the main takeaway. Eagles at Panthers. Again, Cam Newton really should not have been out there. He took 9 sacks in this game. A brutal performance. The Eagles, the one thing that surprised me about the Eagles, their red zone offense has not been very good, but they did convert on 4 of 4 trips. Now, this was a game I gave out Eagles first half, and I gave out Eagles for the game. Very strong on the Eagles, as I showed in that graphic earlier in the podcast about the trending. So I was all over this game in terms of predicting the Eagles, and obviously they led by 38 points, won by 24. It's certainly an easy game for the Eagles in that regard, but I certainly did not expect them to go 4-4 in the red zone. Now, I did share with people, my clients, about, and whoever else signed up for free, about how poor the Carolina Panthers are in terms of red zone defense. Horrible, ridiculously bad red zone defense for the Carolina Panthers. That said, if the Eagles are able to convert at this rate, if this is not just something because they were playing the Carolina Panthers, but the reality is that they are playing a lot better inside the red zone with Mark Sanchez, that's a big upgrade for this team. Big upgrade to not have to settle for field goals but score touchdowns, because we know this Chip Kelly offense is going to get the ball into the red zone. Even if they stall a few times, they're going to get the ball down there. So definitely a big upgrade there. Now, looking at the passing numbers and things of that nature for the Eagles, great yards per pass attempt at 8.6. That was 4th best in the league. But the completion percentage was low. Only 53% completions for Sanchez. That's 3rd worst in the league. Their early down success rate was low at 22nd best in the league. And they could not run the ball at 1.6 yards per carry. That was 2nd worst in the league. Overall, their yards per play, 5th best because of the passing numbers. But the rushing attack definitely gave you cause for concern. Now, on the flip side, the Carolina Panthers, 5 turnovers, taken 9 sacks, not even close. I'm not sure what Cam Newton was out there for so long in that game. They really need to fix some things. They're headed in a downward spiral. Obviously, if they could have a bye this week, they really should use it, because Cam Newton is banged up and injured. But they played Monday night. Now they actually have to come back, and they have a game at 1 o'clock against division rival Atlanta Falcons, which both these teams pretty much are done based on the percentages. But if there's any slight glimmer of hope, you're not going to be able to lose to the Atlanta Falcons. The Carolina Panthers are favored. It's a big game for them. They have to win after that Monday night loss. Short week is going to be tough for them. Okay, let's run through some of these injuries really quick. Obviously, first and foremost, Carson Palmer out for the season, tearing up his ACL. Drew Stanton is going to take snaps under center for the Arizona Cardinals for the immediate future. Star Latulle for the Carolina Panthers, defensive lineman. He's looking to return week 12, so he won't be involved in the game versus the Atlanta Falcons this weekend. It does not appear. Look at the Denver Broncos. Ronnie Hillman, he's dealing with a foot injury, and I think they've listed him as week to week, but it looks like they might rest him for a couple of weeks. Meanwhile, the Detroit Lions are getting back both Eric Ebron and their other tight end, Joseph Foria, back. So those guys should be able to contribute this week out in Arizona, which would help their passing attack a little bit. Obviously, they got Calvin Johnson back last week. The Jacksonville Jaguars, though, their passing attack is headed on the decline. They lost Allen Robinson with a foot injury. He's out for the season. Also, Allen Hurns has a concussion, so he'll have to go through the concussion protocol. We'll see if he gets back out there. Miami Dolphins dealing with a couple of guys. Brandon Albert, their starting tackle, out for the season with his knee injury. That's a big loss to that offensive line. Be really excited to see how they perform against Buffalo tonight. When you look at Cortland Finnegan, defensive back, he's dealing with an ankle injury. I don't believe he practiced on Wednesday, and so it's kind of questionable as to whether or not he's going to be out there. I think he's actually been downgraded to out for this game, so he's not going to be in there for the Miami Dolphins. Looking at the New Orleans Saints, Keenan Lewis, their defensive back, says that he's going to try to play. I saw pictures of his knee. It looks completely jacked up, very swollen. I've dealt with knee injuries myself from sports, both in sports and now since I've been out of sports for a number of years. And knee injuries like that, I'm sure he's just going to get it drained and get it shot up with some cortisone, but it looked pretty nasty after the game there. I'd be surprised if he's anywhere close to 100% on it. Rashad Jennings for the Giants looks like he is going to finally be back for the Giants, so that could be a big help for the run game, particularly when they're losing Michael Cox out for the season, running back, and Peyton Hillis is out. At least, well, he could be out this week due to concussion. We'll have to see. Meanwhile, another running back that is coming back is San Diego Chargers' Ryan Matthews. He'll be back. That's a big help for them. San Francisco 49ers, they lose one and they gain one. They get Aldon Smith back after a suspension, but they lose Patrick Willis for the season. That's a big injury at that second level. Seattle Seahawks, 2 injuries there. They put Zach Miller on the IR. Obviously, they were hoping he'd come back. He had a little procedure done right before the bye week. We're hoping that he would be able to be healthy after the bye week on his ankle. They ended up putting him on IR, so their tight end from last year, Super Bowl run. They also lost Brandon Mebane, who is probably, from what I've been told, the third most important player on that defense. Obviously, the most important player along that line. He was the heart and soul of that front seven. So Mebane is out with a hamstring, torn hamstrings out for the year. And Tampa Bay lost starting guard Kadeem Edwards, and he's out for the year as well. All right, let's start breaking down some of these games. First and foremost, let's start with tonight's game. Buffalo Bills travel to Miami to take on the Dolphins. I think defense is the name of the game in this one. Most important matchup here is going to be the replacement left tackle for the Miami Dolphins, taking over from Brandon Albert. They also are without Darren College, who's dealing with some head injuries. So the Miami Dolphins are going to be without a couple of key players for this game along the offensive line. Not the matchup that you want to be taking on when you're talking about the Buffalo Bills, who are off of 6 sacks over Alex Smith last week. They're going to try to come down and cause a lot of disruption. You're also dealing with Lamar Miller, dealing with an injured shoulder, which is a problem for him. So this is a very tough matchup. Obviously, some money has come in on the Miami Dolphins, pushing this number up to 6. Certainly a tough match for the Buffalo Bills to go on the road on a short week, as it is for all road teams to try to take care of business like that. But I'm looking at this game in the trenches. I'm looking at how well the Miami Dolphins can protect for Ryan Tannehill. On the flip side of the ball, how much will Kyle Orton be under pressure? We know this Miami Dolphins defense, especially the front 4, front 7, can really get after the quarterback, so I'm really excited to see how that defense performs. I'm mainly looking to see who wins these matchups, because I think it's going to be a fascinating game from that perspective. And we already know at 5-4 for both these teams, this is do or die. None of these teams really has a legitimate shot anyways to begin with. The Buffalo Bills are down at like 13 or 14% likely to make the playoffs. The Miami Dolphins a little bit higher at like 22% chance. So these guys are going to have to win this game and win out, because the reality is the loser of this game is going to have 5 losses, and at 5-5, you could make a case that they could win out and get 11 wins and be 11-5 and make it, but that's going to be very tough to do considering some of the upcoming schedules for these teams. So that'll be tough. Looking at Sunday's slate, looking at the Houston-Cleveland game, interesting game to me because Cleveland is this upstart young team. They're playing out of their minds offensively, despite the fact that they can't run the ball. They're just playing so well together and believe in Brian Hoyer so much right now that I think none of the pressure is really getting to them, because they sort of just don't know any better. There's no expectations on this team whatsoever. It's playing loose and free, energetic. They're playing well defensively. They're still not a great defense, but they are playing well defensively. In comes the Houston Texans. Houston Texans obviously did not play last week. Were off of their bye, so expecting them perhaps to start a little bit slower in this game, but a very good run attack. I think the matchup there is going to be important. They're going to need to get Arian Foster to be able to move the ball because, of course, you're looking at the Houston Texans. They're going to be, they obviously sat down their quarterback. They're starting Ryan Mallett in this game, so very, very interested to see how Ryan Mallett performs in this game, and very interested to see I think this game in general, I'm just fascinated. Even though this sounds like a boring game, total at 41.5, the home team's favored by 3 points. I can't wait to see that game. It's definitely one of the 1 o'clock games we're going to be watching very closely, and I'm very positive I'll be involved in this game for clients. I don't want to get into too much detail there, but I'm going to be involved in this game. Minnesota versus the Chicago Bears. They've just been reeling lately. They've been in a lot of issues offensively. Their defense has been lit up, but take into account who they've played. I mean, most teams aren't going to fare very well going up to New England and playing New England, then going and playing the Green Bay Packers. I mean, those are 2 very good offenses. You're playing both of them on the road. Your defense already is not great. I think coming home helps. They haven't won a game there yet, but it still helps to play at home off of those 2 road games. And playing the Minnesota Vikings, who are off of a bye, I believe that also helps as well. So, if this is not the week that Chicago's offense steps up, then they are in for a world of hurt, because some heads are going to be rolling in Chicago if they can't take care of business against Minnesota Vikings and a rookie quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater. The game that looks to be a shootout on all sides is the Philadelphia Eagles at the Green Bay Packers. Fascinating game when you look at these 2 teams, and I don't even want to go into any detail on this one because I'm going to be involved on a few plays in this game. At the very minimum, I think 2. There's going to be a couple ways I'm getting involved in this one, so I'll save that for clients, but there's some very interesting information to share with this game as I break it down. As you guys know, I was on the Eagles on Monday night, first half and the game. Look at the Seattle Seahawks versus the Kansas City Chiefs. This is a sneaky game because both these teams are sitting in the wild card spot. They're going to be playing road games right now. And so it's vitally important that they maintain that position. So one of these teams is going to drop to 6-4 while one improves to 7-3. Very short number here. Seattle, maybe a slight downtick on the road. They're definitely not as good of an offense as they looked to be last week against the New York Giants. Meanwhile, the Kansas City Chiefs, I think, really stole one from the Buffalo Bills. That was a game, if you look at some of the numbers, Buffalo should have won that game outright. They did everything that they could to lose that game late. With turnovers in the red zone and things of that nature. So Kansas City got very lucky to win this game. I think it's going to be a highly competitive, very physical game. Kansas City is not really the downfield type team. They have one main pass threat, that's Dwayne Bowe. I think the Seattle secondary matches up well against him. So I don't really see Kansas City doing a lot vertically in this game. Obviously, I could be wrong. But when you look at Seattle, this is a team that really has not played well offensively on the road, particularly of late. So they're going to have to fix some things because Kansas City is a tough place to play. Just ask Tom Brady. Atlanta, Carolina. Wow, what a terrible division. What a terrible matchup. There's no real intrigue to this game whatsoever. Two teams, they still seem to think that they've got some hope. They really have no hope. Atlanta's got like an 8% chance to make the playoffs, and it's 100% if they can win this division. We know that the New Orleans Saints sit only one game ahead of them in the division. And Atlanta did win at home earlier, so there is hope there, I guess, potentially for the Carolina Panthers and the Atlanta Falcons to win the NFC South, but that division is just bad, and this game is not a game I'm going to be too interested in, although I'm pretty sure I'll be involved in something in this game for sure. New Orleans versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Really want to see what these two teams do because, again, neither of these teams can afford to lose. Cincinnati lost at home to Cleveland. They're out of the playoffs right now. New Orleans is in, but only de facto because of their position in the NFC South rather. So that's going to be a big important game for them. They got to win at home. Losing back-to-back home games really out of the question for them. So they've got to come to this game fully prepared to beat the Cincinnati Bengals. Tampa Bay and Washington just buzz right past this one. Might be involved in it in some manner, but save that one for later. No real point in discussing it in too great of detail. Denver versus St. Louis. The only thing about St. Louis I'll say is that they got rid of Austin Davis. They're bringing back in the quarterback who was there to start the year as soon as they lost Ryan Fitzpatrick. That's Shaun Hill. Main difference between Shaun Hill and Austin Davis is probably going to be the downfield passing or lack thereof. I don't really see Shaun Hill, his arm, his accuracy down the field, nowhere near, I believe, what Austin Davis was. So I'm looking for less offensively from that perspective. If St. Louis turns to run the ball more and throw the ball more close to the line of scrimmage, it's going to be a problem for them because Denver's defense is pretty good in those areas. So it kind of plays into Denver a little bit, but St. Louis has been a team that's been fighting hard for Jeff Fisher, and they really haven't. That game against Arizona really blew up late. That game was a lot closer than the final score indicated. St. Louis has been playing very strongly and deserved back-to-back covers. Obviously, they beat San Francisco, and then they probably deserved to cover against Arizona. Now they're catching a big number here at home, but this is the Denver Broncos of Peyton Manning. San Francisco at the New York Giants. New York Giants defense, a lot of question marks there. San Francisco offense, question marks there. I think that Aldon Smith back is going to make some impact there for San Francisco. It's going to be interesting to see if the New York Giants can allow Eli Manning to get the ball out of his hands quickly and efficiently. But that game's going to be very interesting to watch. Oakland at San Diego. Keep in mind, in this game last time they met earlier this season, Oakland put up 28 points. San Diego won 31-28. Will this game be as close? San Diego's coming off of a bye. Oakland's coming off of a beatdown to the Denver Broncos. So this game's a tough game. San Diego laying a lot of points here. Oakland obviously does not have a win yet. The game featuring two teams with the best records heading into it would be the Arizona Cardinals, 8-1, hosting the Detroit Lions. I've said on this podcast before, I'll say it once again. We know Arizona lost Carson Palmer, that's a fact. However, what we do know from what I've told you before is that Drew Stanton is going to fire the ball more down the field. He's got a bigger arm, he's younger, he's more capable of pushing the ball down the field. What that means is less Larry Fitzgerald, more John Brown, more Michael Floyd, and more incompletions. Now, it's higher risk, higher reward. Clock stops more due to the incompletions, less accuracy, but he'll hit on some bigger plays. I think Detroit should be able to pass the ball a little bit on this Arizona Cardinals defense. If you look at this Arizona Cardinals defense, keep in mind that their average opponent defenses are right around the middle of the pack at 17th. Their pass defense is top 5, but I'm pretty sure that they would be able to give up some big plays in the pass game to a team who could fire the ball out. And of course, when you look at some of these big play numbers, Arizona ranks 27th in the league at giving up big pass plays. So they are one of the worst teams in that category, and they really haven't played a whole ton of offenses that really chuck the ball down the field. So I think there's going to be opportunities for some plays in this game. New England at Indianapolis, I'm going to be involved in this game as well. The only thing I can tell you about this game is both these offenses are in sync. Both these offenses are clicking. Both these offenses are very strong from an early down success rate perspective. And I haven't formulated my write-up or anything for this game yet, but it's going to be a fascinating game. I do think, however, that there is a lot of uncertainty in terms of how quickly this game progresses. I think that it could go one of two ways very quickly. So, going to be a fascinating game to watch. Obviously, great to have it on Sunday Night Football. And then you close out the week, Pittsburgh at Tennessee, a game that neither team really has a great shot at making the playoffs. Obviously, Tennessee's long gone. I don't really think Pittsburgh is a legitimate contender. They have problems. They struggle against bad teams, particularly on the road, as we saw against the Jets. They should come in here and win this game. They should win this game handedly, but they usually don't live up to those types of expectations when they're on the road playing a subpar team. The best part for the Steelers, I think, is the fact that they just lost a game like this last week to the Jets, and so this would be back-to-back losses in the same spot. It's not uncommon, it's not out of the question, but it would be a little bit more difficult to catch them completely sleeping and really off in this particular game. So while I probably don't expect the same results out of the Steelers that they produced at home for 3 straight weeks, where Ben was putting up those ridiculous production numbers, they should take care of business here, but it's going to be a game that I'm probably not very eager to watch. I don't really know that we're going to see exciting football here. So it's just a game on the schedule to me. I'm not sure if I'll even be involved in that one. With that said, that takes care of the Week 11 games. Certainly a number of fascinating games on the docket. Really excited to dig in more and put out some additional plays. I've already got a few recommendations out there right now and looking to add some write-ups to those and jump on a couple more games. There's a few sides that I really like this week. I really haven't liked a whole lot of sides the past few weeks, but there's definitely some that are catching my eye this week I'll definitely be involved in. So I'm liking the card this week, and it should be interesting to see how this one plays out. Good luck, everybody, on Week 11. Stay safe. We'll see you guys Week 12.
Come on. Run them too fast. Run them too fast. Run them too fast. Run them too fast.
It's gonna be a fun ride. This is gonna be a fun ride.
Everybody one clap.
I'm gonna play when I wanna play, do what I wanna do. I'm gonna say what I wanna say. Did I say anything stupid today? My role is to take the ball deep, take the top off the defense. To take the ball deep, take the top off the defense.
If I can't get to it, nobody can get to it.
I don't shine shoes, I don't tape ankles, I don't cut checks.
Great cash, homie.
I don't shine shoes, I don't tape ankles, I don't cut checks.
Great cash, homie.
Everybody one clap. One clap. One clap. One clap.